Hello, hello. I've got a new episode of our top 5 of the week for you. This month is International Women's Month, and a good segue into my first recommendation, which is a report from UN Women that looks at the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on women and girls, including how it is affecting extreme poverty, employment, health, unpaid care, and violence against women and girls. Along these lines, the report found that, number one, a lot is still unknown on the immediate health effects of COVID-19, but sexual and reproductive health services must be a priority. Two, the pandemic struck feminized labor sectors, and women on the front lines are more affected by the pandemic. Targeted efforts are needed to protect women workers. Three, COVID-19 will push millions into poverty, and gender poverty gaps will worsen as a result of the crisis. 4. Home is not a safe space for many women and girls, and services for domestic violence survivors must be part of the pandemic response. And number 5, gender data needs to be prioritized. The pandemic is affecting national statistical systems. My next recommendation is part of IFED's Lessons Learned series, but this time on the scaling up of rural youth access to inclusive financial services for entrepreneurship and employment. This report highlights the importance of increasing accessibility of financial services for rural youth and women in agribusiness as a means to boost employment and build their disposable income. It presents lessons learned over a 4-year period between 2017 and 2021, with a focus on youth-led rural enterprises in Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi. The lessons learned include 1. Capacity development and mentorship make a difference. Through training, young people acquired various skill sets such as proposal development and techniques for pitching to banks. The second lesson, matching projects to financial institutions promotes growth of youth enterprises. Measuring and categorization of youth projects generated important lessons for the youth enterprises in understanding their readiness for financial services. And the third lesson is that linking youth enterprises with IFAD investment projects increases impact. This is what I call a quick read because it is only 8 pages long. Recommendation number 3 is titled Place, Productivity and Prosperity, Revisiting Spatially Targeted Policies for Regional Development. It explores the relationship between place, productivity and prosperity in the context of urban and regional development. It argues that place is central for productivity as well as economic growth, notably as economies developed and as people concentrate in urban centers. It breaks down 3 drivers, including agglomeration economies, migration, and distance, and discusses the ways in which they interact and have evolved over the past century in developing countries. On agglomeration, it argues that many cities in developing countries appear to be less productively concentrated and accrue all the negative aspects of urbanization, including crime, congestion, and pollution, without the productivity gains that traditionally have pulled along national development. On migration, the report finds that there is less mobility than has historically been the case, which means that the reaction to negative shocks is weak, leaving populations stranded in areas with no jobs and arguably little future. With regards to distance, it states that globalization and the dramatic fall in transport costs has reduced the need for local cities, and growth is increasingly concentrated in a few megacities, primarily on the coast, serving the international market. At number 4 is the Equality of Opportunity for Sexual and Gender Minorities report that assesses laws and regulations that affect the lives of sexual and gender minorities. It argues that although progress has been made over the past 2 decades, sexual and gender minorities continue to face discrimination and violence in developed and developing countries. Its main findings are that, number 1, though more countries have taken steps towards equality for sexual minorities, legal recognition of and protection for transgender people is not yet a reality in most countries. 2. Access to inclusive education, public services, social protection, civil and political inclusion, and protection from hate crimes are often overlooked. 3. The existence of inclusive laws and regulations does not always ensure that sexual and gender minorities are free from discrimination. Enforcement of these laws is crucial. The findings also provide insight into how the COVID-19 pandemic is adversely affecting sexual and gender minorities. Finally, is a report developed in 2021 by the World Bank's Environment Global Practice on internal climate migration in West African countries. This report affirms the potential of climate change to drive internal migration in West African countries. It states that without concrete climate and development action, up to 32 million people in West Africa could be compelled to move within their countries by 2050 in response to water scarcity, declines in crop productivity and ecosystem productivity, and sea level rise. The report also predicts the emergence of climate in and climate out migration hotspots as early as 2030, but with continued spread and intensification by 2050. Niger, Nigeria, and Senegal are projected to have the highest numbers of internal climate migrants by 2050, reaching a high of 19.1 million, 9.4 million, and 1 million, respectively. Thanks for your attention, and I hope you enjoy reading these. Till next week, stay safe